Jonathan Toews, 9 years in the league, 3 Stanley Cups, 2 gold medals, Conn Smythe, a Messier, a Selke. Not bad, old friend.
It's been a good run.
Yeah.
Hopefully, keeps going. I guess we're kind of heading towards the back nine, so it's time to, recover and use this off season and keep her going, I guess.
That's one of the things that, is interesting, because if you do win the cup, your off season is almost nothing, because you're playing all the way into June, and then you're doing all kinds of different media and carrying the cup around, and it's pretty much like you don't have an off season, then you run right back into it. Do you think that plays into one of the reasons why you guys keep winning in alternating years? It's hard to maintain that energy without a good enough mental break?
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, I can't really obviously compare it to any other sport, not knowing what that offseason or what that turnaround is like. But I just think that you look at teams around the league, especially within our division, there's at least 10 teams every year that make the playoffs that think they can win the cup. So, I mean, beginning with that and throwing the fact that you just mentioned that our offseason is such a quick turnaround that if you win the cup, I don't want to say that some of that stuff, the aftermath of it becomes responsibility, because it is an amazing experience and to absorb all that attention, all the crazy energy that comes with it. But if you're trying to focus and you mentally need some time away from the game for a little while before you start getting your body ready for the next season, and that comes so fast. I mean, I think we kind of got in a groove where we're getting used to it, and we made it to the final where we won. We went to the conference final where we lost against LA. Then we won last year in the final. But I think this year, to a certain degree, I don't think we make any excuses going on throughout the season. But I mean, it just added up, and we ran into a really good team. And sometimes that happens, regardless of how much hockey you played in the last couple of years.
Yeah, this was an interesting, season against an interesting series against the Blues. I mean, they had kind of a similar strategy that everybody has against you guys, which is just to hit you at every possible opportunity. Yeah. Does that get annoying that that's the strategy that everybody plays, or is it just like, all right?
Well, some of our toughest series kind of came to that. If you think of last year in the conference final against Anaheim, they tried to do the same thing. And we were essentially running on our top 4 D-men. And those guys took some huge minutes, especially late in some of those games where we were going to second and third overtime. And it was the same thing against St. Louis. I think it takes a lot of energy to run around and hit like that. So I think we just know that we don't get into that sort of thing for the most part, and we just play our game. But I guess some teams they just want to try and get us off our game, and that's the route that they take, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like they recognize the skill that you guys inherently have, and then they just get it in their head that that's the way to do it. And most of the time, you prove them wrong. And I wouldn't say that even in the Blues series they were proved right. It's just felt like there's this razor's edge that these games are often decided by, but the goals are seldom and far between. So it's really it's interesting watching hockey. I think that's why soccer and hockey are some of the most exciting sports, is because these goals are, there's only a few of them, and there's a long game. It's not like basketball where you kind of grind out a score incrementally. You can be really dominating a game and then have a goal go against you that way. Is that an interesting sport to play in that way, that sometimes the score doesn't reflect the actual dominance that you're showing out there on the ice?
Absolutely. I mean, it brings up an example in my mind. Game 6 in Boston, I think it was in 2013 when we ended up winning in Game 6. We were lucky to walk out of that first period. I believe we were just down 1-0. I've never seen a team come out flying like that. And you lose Game 6 when you have a chance to hoist, and it doesn't matter if you're going back home. That team's going to come in flying, and they got that momentum. So they pretty much dominated that game for the most part, and we find a way to just steal it from them at the end. Sometimes it happens, but I think, like you said, the game is unique, especially in the playoffs, because it's all about momentum. And I think for the most part, if I can think back to the series against St. Louis this year, there were some games where we felt we definitely deserved to win, but we were, in some ways, we were trying to score too much. I think when you check and you let the other team make mistakes, you don't need 50 shots to score a couple goals. You're going to get your chances, and I think it's almost easier for a goaltender to get in that zone and stand on their head if they're seeing more shots. So I think that's kind of what we saw in a few of those games, that we came up short a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So as captain of the squad, how much in-game maneuvering are you doing with your team and players? I mean, are you just kind of basically keeping yourself in the game and leading by example, or are there, times throughout on the bench where you're providing different cues and kind of letting your guys know, like, hey, all right, let's alter this attitude a little bit?
Well, it's funny because if you talk to most of my teammates, they would probably say that at some point or another, I probably get on their nerves. I think I've always been that vocal guy who I've really tried to work on balancing not talking too much and not getting in anyone's head, but also making sure that I'm engaged and I'm emotionally engaged in the game, because I think that's when I play my best. But sometimes it's just come back to the bench and forgetting what just happened in that previous shift, not necessarily having to run through it vocally with line mates or whatever, and just moving on, taking a deep breath and moving on to the next shift. And sometimes that means just shut your mouth and play the game. So for me, it's been a balancing act and kind of learning, like, not only what makes me engage in the game and playing my best, but also not having any sort of vocal energy on the bench that might be detrimental or causing some distraction in some ways too. So but yeah, it's some little things like that are a work in progress every day, that you know what makes you go, but it's also trying to survey and observe and really know what's going on and communicate the right things at the right time, especially in the heat of the moment when it's kind of easy to let your emotion get the best of you.
Yeah, it seems like an essential skill for life or hockey is to be able to forget your previous shift. I mean, I think humans are really bad at carrying our mistakes with us and letting that be something that limits us. So, how is that translated? I mean, is that something that you work on in life that helps you in hockey, or you work on in hockey and it helps you in life, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, there's no doubt. I think you carry your personality and your own personal habits into that high-pressure situation. So I think, I don't know, it could be a little bit of both. I think the way I've really started thinking going into games is that whatever challenges come up in the game, whatever moments that are testing my will or that are going against how I plan the game to go, should be moments that I shouldn't be dreading. They should be more looked at as opportunities to test what I've got and see if I can just overcome that and play through it and still find ways to produce and get the results that I'm setting myself out to get, whether that's offensive production or just finding ways to help our team win. But obviously I think there's a lot of ways that translates into everyday life, things that, whether they're responsibilities, little things that pop up every day that would drive most people crazy, you can start to look at as an opportunity to test what you got as a person instead of letting those things get the best of you. So easier said than done, obviously, but I think if you have an attitude, you can start to be a little bit more conscious of those things that come your way. Yeah,
that's that's the epitome of Stoic philosophy. That's what Marcus Aurelius was talking about, and what Ryan Holiday's writing about in his book Obstacle is the Way, is seeing these obstacles, and instead of looking at them as curses or bad luck, as just another opportunity to strengthen your own resolve and overcome those. And I suppose that, playing at a championship level, it almost necessitates that kind of attitude where you're looking at the challenge ahead of you and just relishing that opportunity to test your skills. I mean, is that something that you see kind of across the board in the league, people who've made it that far, or is there still quite a bit of variance even at that top level from people having that attitude?
Yeah, I think if you look at our team, it's funny, like there's a lot of people that I think want to know what we do, how do we train, what are the things that we're doing off the ice to prepare, how have we had the success we've had in the last handful of years. I think to me that the biggest answer there is the fact that we have at least a core group of guys that have that resiliency, that have that knowledge that if we get into a tough spot, like a 3-1 deficit where we're down 3-0, where we've been there before, but we know that at that point we can be a really tough team to put away, and doesn't matter how bad it gets, there's always something we can do to put that pressure on the other team. And once I said this about this year too, if you make it through Game 7 against St. Louis, the belief that floods through the group, if you win Game 7 coming back from a 3-1 deficit, that there's no worse situation that you're probably going to face than that, then I think that's when that true belief sinks in every individual, that you got the team to win. And we've done that before, and I think you don't win a Stanley Cup or you don't really achieve anything great if you don't go through some darker moments where things don't look so good. So I think that's one of the bigger qualities that our group of guys, especially the guys who've been there for the 3 cups, have shown over those years.
Is there a tendency, and then you see it with some championship teams, that you're so good in that situation where your back's to the wall that maybe there is a tendency to kind of let the gas off a little bit until you really need it, and you could maybe see that some parts are in the season, some parts are in the playoff. Just this kind of instinct like, man, we'll turn it on when we need to, that kind of belief. You see it with fighters too.
Maybe a little bit. I think a lot of people have kind of talked about that too, and when they see our record in games 5, 6, 7 in a series, when it really matters, as you said, our record in that situation is pretty incredible. I can't exactly give you the numbers right now, but I got a lot of questions this year, like, well, why is it that you guys obviously turn it on in those situations? And there might be a little bit of that in there. I think it's not that you're not raising your game in the early parts of a series, but I guess when it just comes down to it, we know how to turn it on and to not be our own worst enemy mentally. I think when you really want something that bad. So I think experience definitely plays a part in those situations too. And
also relishing a challenge, for a team that relishes that challenge, that's always going to elevate to the best level possible. I mean, if you bring it back to the fighting analogy, I remember there's a point where Daniel Cormier, who's also a champion, wasn't a champion then, says, I've been waiting my whole life for an opponent that could take me to the edge, basically, like John Jones, be that man. Well, right. John Jones was that guy and more, beat him up. But that's the attitude of a champion, and DC's now obviously a champion, and I'll fight it again. But I think that kind of idea, like, bring your best, because that's what's going to bring the most out of us. I think that's a real differentiating factor that I've seen as a common thread. The great champions don't want an opponent who's going to suck. Yeah. They don't want to go out there and fight someone who's just going to lay down, because it's going to drop their game to that level. They want that test that's going to allow them to go, push past their own limitations and find the edge of their performance. And I think that's what everybody, all the fans and everybody, loves to see as well. You love those rivalries as Bird and Magic and Jordan and all these other rivalries that existed. And I think that's what we love to see.
You're absolutely right. And I think it's the biggest thing I learned too is not getting too far ahead of yourself and being too concerned with the result, because then that's when the process really starts to get on your nerves, and those things that get in your way, you might not respond the right way. So I think, as you're saying, for a fighter, it's not that special to wear a belt if it was a cakewalk to get there. So that concentration on the process, I think, is the biggest thing that makes it special to win something, because it's only worth the price that you pay to get there. So I think that's the way we look at it. If we had 4 straight sweeps to win a Stanley Cup, then who cares? It's got to be a tough road, and I think that's why you see those guys who hoist the cup at the end of the year. It's the ultimate bonding experience with your teammates to kind of overcome all that stuff. And I've always said it too, that the most special moments are the ones like directly after on the ice and in the locker room, and still that group of guys, because then after that everyone goes their separate ways and it's all over, I guess.
Yeah. So you have a unique approach to both mental and physical preparation. I mean, you're one of those guys, as getting to know you as well as I do, you're constantly looking to absorb information, whether that's a book or whether it's a conversation we're having or research or other outside sources. How important is that to have brought you to where you are? Ryan Holiday in his latest book, for example, talks about the greatest conqueror of all time, Genghis Khan, and he attributes that to him being the greatest learner of all time. Whatever culture he encountered, his ego was not so big that he didn't learn everything he possibly could from that culture. Do you think that's part of the key to your success?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think like yourself, I think that's why we've gotten along so well. And I think some of the teammates that obviously you've met too, guys like Duncan, Keith, are the types of guys that are always looking for some other part to fill out the entire spectrum of what makes you a better performer. So at the end of the day, it can be all the things from reading books to studying to watching your own performance to learning from other athletes, whether it's hockey players or anyone across the board really. But at the end of the day, I think it's really trying to learn from your own experience too. At the end of the day, there's a lot you can read about and learn and analyze in that regards. But I think your experience definitely comes into it too, where you have to learn to test that out and to not be afraid of failure, and obviously strive for the results that you want, but to learn from when it doesn't quite work out that way. So for me, it's always been learning how to deal with that failure and not letting it affect my confidence going forwards. And like you said, learning from any way that you really can.
Yeah. You mentioned confidence and belief in these things, and I think you're one of those individuals that have navigated a path of maintaining your confidence and belief, but without using ego as that crutch to stay inflated, which ends up being to your own detriment when you have too much of an ego. Is dealing with the ego, has that been something that's just been innate for you? Is that something through your upbringing and just through your natural character has been an issue? Or is that something that you consciously pay attention to and try and work with on a more conscious basis?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that it's a ongoing battle in some ways. I mean, if I think of back when I was a kid, being more of a shy introvert, like hockey was my escape in a lot of ways. It was where I was the strongest, and it gave me a lot of sense of self-confidence and self-worth, and maybe in some ways on an unhealthy level. And sometimes you can see it in other athletes or other people who are immensely successful, that sometimes their insecurities are what drives them. And I've kind of learned to deal with that and understand that there's obviously more to life than hockey, and you kind of are able to step outside of that and eventually learn that that's not what should drive you, that you should just be excited and be happy about what you do, and realize that it's just a way to test what you have every single day. And I think there's still situations where that ego maybe gets in the way. And if I think of, even earlier in the season last year, when I think you're used to having success, you're used to being one of the top players, you're used to having ice time and opportunities, and things maybe click your way. And early in the season, it felt like everything was going the wrong way. Nothing was going in. I was trying to do everything right, and nothing was going that way. And over time, I ended up catching myself really feeling sorry for myself, feeling victimized, feeling like, I'm doing everything right and nothing's going my way, and on and on and on. And I just eventually came to the point, I'm like, how did I get to this point where I'm getting so full of myself that I think that things should just always go my way? And I realized, hey, it's time to take a few steps back, start over, and start dealing with these challenges the way I would have when I was a wide-eyed rookie. And I was excited about playing every single night, and I wasn't jaded or desensitized to playing in front of great fans in Chicago. And I really learned to just take a few steps back and start over. So I'd say it's an ongoing battle all the time, that you need to keep things in perspective in that way, especially when you're used to walking around Chicago and they treat you like a 3-time Stanley Cup champ, and you can kind of get full of yourself sometimes. So those are the things that you definitely have to think about.
Yeah, I think we can all apply those situations to our own life, these, both from the feeling sorry for ourselves when things don't go well, and this kind of expectation that everything is going to be easy, that you deserve something that you have or whatever, and it's good to be mindful of when we're all playing our own victim games, because there's no doubt that that's
easy to fall into sometimes.
That's only going to be a detriment. And it's also interesting to become aware of this kind of moving scale of what excites us. It's almost like we get tolerant to these things that are really incredible. Like when you were a kid, just imagining, skating out onto the ice for an NHL team and hearing the crowd roar. I mean, that thought alone would just light your body on fire.
Absolutely.
And then, as you said, having won a couple cups and going out there, the target is moved to such a degree that you can almost forget and just take for granted that thing that as a kid and as for most of your life would have been the greatest achievement possible. And we all have that. I mean, myself as CEO of On It, I'll catch myself coming in and all bummed out in a day. I built my absolute dream company in a dream place. I have everything going for me that I would have killed for my whole life. But in a single day, I can forget all that and be like, oh man, this thing didn't work out right. And it's a really important practice to just go back and refresh the senses and get back to like a ground zero state in whatever way that's possible. And for me, it's, I've had a variety of adventures, but it really comes down to getting still and getting isolated, getting away from nature, getting back to the basics, just getting down to myself and everything stripped down and then starting from fresh.
Do you think too that like there's that other side of it too, that in your moments where you want to perform your best at whatever that you're doing, in your situation, it might be meeting with people that mean a lot or can bring a lot to your company, or there's a lot at stake that you maybe what draws you to that side where you're unappreciative or whatever you might be, that you want to maintain that sense of just coolness and being cold-blooded and ready to execute without thinking of all the things that are at stake and all the things that you just mentioned that you're so appreciative of, that in your mind at the end of the day ends up adding a lot of pressure to the situation.
Right.
So do you think there's a balance between there too? It helps to remind yourself once in a while, or
Yeah, I think that really what it comes down to is that the ego has to be okay with all outcomes. Right, because otherwise it's going to be afraid.
Right.
So if you fear the loss because it's going to diminish how you view yourself or how much you love yourself, then you're going to overextend yourself. You're going to push too hard. You're going to be nervous. You're going to be playing scared to a certain degree, and whether it's sports or business or life or poker, it doesn't really matter. So the key thing for me is to constantly work on my attachments and work on being okay and loving myself no matter what happens. Right. If, a group of every plaintiff attorney in the world gets together and decides to sue On It all at the same time and just to obliterate us, and On It, gets blasted from the face of the earth by all of these court cases, then I have to still be okay with myself as not CEO of On It and just a dude who likes to podcast and write, and it goes on down the line. Like if a car accident takes my legs and I can't work out, can I be okay as pure consciousness? Or if anything comes and takes even my life, can I be okay with the life that I've lived and what I've accomplished? And so it's this constant process of being okay with the outcomes that removes the fear and then really actually allows passion to flourish.
Yeah, I think it's also easy to think that until it actually happens, then
True.
Acting that out is a whole different thing. I mean, have you ever had any encounters like that have really reminded you that you are capable of doing it, or is it just something that you're mentally visualizing or preparing yourself for? Because at the end of the day, nothing stays the same, right?
I mean, well, the cataclysmic stuff fortunately hasn't happened, you know, and so a lot of that is just premeditation. It's just getting ready for the worst. You know, it's like the samurais preparing for battle. You know, they would premeditate. Stoics the same thing. They would meditate on all the ways that they could die, so that when they were confronted with all the dangers available, they wouldn't flinch, because a flinch could mean death. So you're preparing for these worst case outcomes, and you know, if they came, you know, I'd like to think that I was a little bit more prepared, but of course, you know, that's going to be a massive challenge to undertake. But I think, you know, any kind of mental rehearsal that you do, whether you're rehearsing visualization, you know, before something that you're doing, visualizing if you're going to give a speech, visualizing the speech going well. If you're going to play a game, visualizing that going well. If you're going to, you know, make love to a new, beautiful woman, visualizing that going well. Whatever you visualize is going to improve, you know, your opportunity to make that happen. And is that something that you really actively put into your game? Is, you know, visualization of what you're doing out there? Yeah,
well, it always has been. I think more than ever, probably the last few years, understanding how much. I mean, even when I'm not on the ice and I'm training off the ice in the off season, realizing that if I can truly start to embed certain trains of thought and try and make those become a habit, then you know, again, that confidence can be unshakable when things aren't going so well. So yeah, it's not just when I'm preparing to go on the ice, but I think the other thing that you really brought to my mind is the aspect that you just talked about, that the negative visualization that obviously the Stoics talk about, and I guess visualizing the negative outcome and just being okay with it and taking a deep breath and knowing that there's always tiny little incremental steps you can take to come back from it, instead of saying, well, got scored on first shift tonight, it's going to be a rough one, and then you're automatically doing the math in your head that, you know, you're going to crap the bed for the rest of the night, and that's usually how it plays out for a lot of guys, and some guys are, you know, understanding of that, and they're able to just let it go. And I think it sometimes is inherent in your personality. If you're an easygoing guy and you're just like, whatever, you know, it doesn't matter. But for a guy like myself, maybe not so much. So it's definitely something you got to work at.
My mom was a professional tennis player, and she talked about two types of really successful champion tennis players. And there are some people who operated like basically under the level of normal thought, you know. And she described, and no offense to Mr. Borg, but she described Bjorn Borg, who was a famous champion. And she would say, that dude, all he would do is just watch cartoons, and then when it was time to play championship level tennis, he'd just get out there and play. You know, and then there's other players like McEnroe or Connors who were very cerebral and had to master the way that their mind worked, because they couldn't drop beneath thought and just become action embodied. They had to harness their mind and use it to their advantage. And I really think that, you know, from everything I've seen, that applies. There's some athletes that can just get out there and let their mind, you know, check their mind back at the hotel. And it's just like they're out there playing, nothing's going to faze them. They're like sharks, you know. And then there's other people who, you know, have this really active and strong mind and have to learn how to use that to their advantage. Otherwise, it's going to be a massive detriment. And it sounds like, from what you're describing, what I know about you, you're in that latter category where you've had to learn techniques in order to use your mind to your advantage and prevent it from being its own worst enemy.
Yeah, I think if I can speak about myself personally, I've always thought, and I looked at some guys who are so naturally talented and maybe were taught the right ways to skate and the right ways to handle a puck and shoot, and they have all the physical, you know, tangible attributes that I guess most people might be surprised, but I'm very jealous of in some ways. But then the more I think about it, I think the more difficulties you go through along the way to getting, you know, to the professional level. I think when you have to learn to overcome adversity, when you're not always the biggest guy, when you're not always the fastest, when you don't always have the most physical raw talent, you have that whole end of the spectrum where when it gets really tough, whether it's, you know, in championship playoff hockey and for the Stanley Cup, you can thank yourself later that you're in that moment. You know that you're going to respond the right way because of, you know, all the things you've learned along the way. Whereas some guys that maybe have relied upon their talent to get them there don't necessarily have the ability nor the mental map to be able to navigate and overcome that adversity, and they just end up accepting their external environment. So there's two ends of the spectrum. Obviously, if you can be the fastest, strongest player on the ice, that's great, but there's still that other end of the spectrum you need to work on. So I guess in some ways it's tough to have both, but I think it's possible.
Yeah. One of the things that, I think if I could bottle any aspect of you that I've seen out there and apply that universally to my life and anybody else, it's the consistent effort by which you do the small things. And I think that's one of the reasons why you wear the C on your jersey, is whatever the face-off, whatever kind of digging out a puck at the corner of the boards or anything like that, your effort never seems to vary from straight 100%. Where does that come from? How do regular mere mortals find that ability to apply that effort in all the little things that we do?
Well, first of all, I appreciate your compliment. I don't know if I'd always ever take it that far, but I guess, and this goes with discussions you and I have had before too, I think there are a lot of similarities and qualities in yourself that I also see that at the end of the day, I think what people respond to is whether you show up to work and you grind it out every single day, and if you're doing the little things right, and if you're doing the things that you expect your last employer, your teammate at the bottom of the depth chart, whoever that might be, that might not feel like he's overly appreciated or overly recognized for what he brings to the team, but if you're willing to do what you expect him or her or whoever to do to make that team or that collective organization better, then I think there's that respect, I think, amongst the group goes a long way. So although I don't like to talk about myself that much as a leader or give myself praise in any way, I'll always say there's a ton of things that I always need to work on, and that I'm learning also from my teammates and the other leaders in the locker room that maybe don't get as much credit as I do. But I think that's one of the things that maybe was noticed early on, especially coming into my professional career, that earned me the C, the captaincy to begin with. So, and again, checking the ego at the door, that's one of the things that I got to remember not to forget and to continue with.
Mm-hmm. I think I appreciate your kind words about myself as well, but honestly, I'm a little bit different than you in that I'm more of like a streak, individual, where I know that in a given stretch, I can push out more effort and more focus and more intensity than most people, and that's what allows me to reach the heights that I've been able to fortunately achieve. Is like focused stretches of intensity that are really can push me. I'm like a sprinter who needs to sprint and then recover and then sprint and then recover. But I really admire the people that can be like the day in, day out grinder, just like every time. And it seems like you're able to do that, just hammer. Because it's certainly not what my strength is. My strength is, incredible ferocity, work output. I can accomplish more in a short amount of time. But then I have to like unwind and unplug. Absolutely. I mean, how much of that is just a resiliency that you have, and how much of that is just pure, just mental? Like someone like Jocko Willink, I don't know if you know him, but every morning he's setting his clock for 4 a.m. and he's getting up and doing that. I mean, is that just a habit that you develop, or is that some kind of resiliency that you have?
Well, that sounds awful, but I'm not really equipped to comment on that. But I don't know. I think if I look at myself back in the beginning of my career, even beyond that, my college or high school days or whatever, to now, I think the biggest difference is I've been able to not have to soak up so much mental energy for those little things that need to be done every single day, whether it's just physical preparation or doing the little things on and off the ice just to get my body ready. And then, as you said, there's no doubt that I have streaks too here and there where things are going well. I'm just giving it everything I got until a certain point where you're going to have that chance to have a breather and get ready for the next run. But I guess in some ways too, it's learning how to handle the NHL season. I think you always see some of these young players who come in, they're excited to play every single night. And I'm not saying the rest of us aren't, but there's a whole nother deal when you're a rookie and everything is so new, and they come out flying and they have a great first season where the next year, the second or third year is never quite the same. So you definitely need to learn to handle that 82 game stretch. And I think hockey players are well known for the routines and getting into that routine and knowing that you go through step 1 through 5 and you're going to be ready to do the things that you train yourself to do that night. So in some ways, like, I'm not that ingrained in my routines. I like to change things up. I think it helps maintain a little bit of the creative thought when you go out on the ice. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of, I think, knowing the things that you do have to do to be ready and to be at your best, and trying to let that be an innate habit that is not straining or dragging down your mental energy. So again, a lot of those things it takes time to develop that, but I think that's a huge part of getting through the season and playing your best hockey when it matters most.
Yeah, for sure. So what else is left for you to accomplish out there on the ice? Like, what do you want at the end of your career to be able to look back from now? You were saying that you have another, you're on the back 9 now, so that would be saying
getting close. I didn't say I was on the back 9. You said that.
You have you're looking forward at another, maybe it's a midway point in your career, something along that line though. So what is it in this next stretch that you're looking to accomplish? What do you want to get out of this sport that you love?
Well, there's no doubt winning is the best thing that can happen. I mean, it rises above anything you can ever accomplish individually. Although I'm not going to lie, there's always that desire to want to prove myself as being one of the top players in the league. Production-wise, I've always believed I could be there. Obviously, we have guys in our team, a guy like Patrick King, who just came off an amazing year, and I think it's being around guys like him and Duncan and Brent Seabrook and Marion Hossa, go down the list of guys that are always pushing to get better. So in that regards, I think there's a lot left to do, and at the same time, the expectation is out of our team is probably higher than it's ever been. So not only does that make it tougher to win, but the fact that we're getting every team's best game more often than not, the challenges are always mounting. They're always going to be tougher, So from year to year, we always seem to lose a couple key players due to salary cap issues. There's always something new, so I don't think that challenge is ever going to get old. And winning in Chicago is as good as it gets. I mean, ask me 5-6 years ago, would we have 3 cups by now? No one would have imagined that, knowing how tough it is just to win one time. But every time you get to the playoffs, it's another opportunity, and you never know when you're going to get back there. So I think that's the goal, is to keep doing what we've been doing and overcome the different challenges that are coming our way.
Love it. So let's talk a little bit about On It. We got to know each other as friends first, and you kind of also, Duncan was taking some of our stuff, and now that you've gotten to be here, you've gotten to try a lot more of the things. What are some of the ways that our philosophy aligns with yours, On It's philosophy aligns with yours, and what are some of the tools that you've been able to pick up to help you along the way? Yeah,
and I guess it started a while ago, but earlier in my career, I really had some I guess I wouldn't call them health issues, but like, it was just taking so much of my mental energy to push through every single day, or I wasn't sleeping. I wake up with no energy. I felt like I was hungry and needed to eat all the time. And I got sick all the time, and my health was just like going down the tubes. And I was 20, 21, 22 years old. I'm like, okay, there's no way everyone else feels the same way I feel. There's something going on here. And that's when I started working with our nutritionist, Julie Burns in Chicago, who has done a great job with our team and the testing, understanding more about your body. Obviously, I think it started with baby steps, and now I probably drive people nuts when I always talk about nutrition and healthy eating and all that stuff. But I think that was where it all began, where I started to understand all the different little things I could be doing to improve my energy level on the ice, but also just to, be able to come home and leave everything at the rink and go on with my personal life. And I think everyone needs that balance too. If you're gonna be sane and happy and ready for the next time to go out there. So all that went together, and I think obviously it's been an evolution coming up until this point. But I've really started to think ever since I became much more conscious about what I eat. I think you start to learn about where your food comes from, how it's produced, how far it has to travel to get to your plate, and then all the things that are kind of becoming very trendy to talk about nowadays. So that's the next step, and then we get into consciousness, all the different things that the little steps people can take, not only to better themselves, but to eventually have a positive impact on their communities. I mean, all that kind of blends together at the end of the day. I mean, there's not one part that doesn't affect the other in some way. So meeting you through Duncan and through some other friends and getting to know you guys and what your company is all about, I think it's obvious why there's a good fit there, because of how you guys are doing such a great job at providing the tools, the necessary, the supplements, nutrition, the mental part of not only being a good performer on the playing field. It doesn't matter what you do, but it goes for anybody. And I think that's the biggest thing is optimizing, your personal life and being just a better all-around person that has a positive effect on everybody. And I think that's what's truly inspiring and why I'm happy to be an on-it athlete. So it's been a lot of fun, and obviously it's just the start. So.
Indeed, my brother, indeed. You got a chance to work out at the On-It Academy yesterday. What were your general impressions of how we were doing things out there?
Yeah, well, it was good. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of people in there again, and it kind of proves what I'm saying right now, that there's bodybuilders, there's fighters, there's different athletes, and there's, again, just the people that are coming in just to stay fit and have that healthy lifestyle. So it was cool. We did some stuff that I've never really done before that, if you ever think you're a really good, fit, flexible, strong, explosive athlete, then you do some of these things that at first glance look really easy and you realize that they're not. It makes me realize there's a lot to work on, especially off the ice. So it was a lot of fun. Beautiful.
Well, it's been great to have you out here, my friend. Looking forward to a lot more of this and building an interesting, awesome future, not only for ourselves, but for everybody involved. I think, out of any athlete I've met, I've never met anyone more dedicated to that path of total human optimization, looking at all aspects from consciousness to body to spirit, mind, everything. So it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing what we can figure out.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right.
Appreciate it.